I used to think burnout sounded like a word for engines and candles, machines and sugar. It didn't seem like a thing that could happen to a person who weighed espresso and steadied foam like it was a small weather system in my hand. But by May, the hiss of the steam wand began to feel like someone sighing at me, and my reflection in the metal pitcher was a sliver of a man with eyelids the color of oversteeped tea. By day, I was Ezra, senior barista at Juniper and Rye, a cafe with a wall of plants and a tip jar full of foreign coins. By night, very late on Thursdays and occasionally on weekends, I was Moxie Midnight, a frosted glass version of myself who lip-synced power ballads and balanced on heels like a promise I kept mostly to my own hungry heart. Drag was oxygen, but it didn't pay the rent, and the morning shift began at 5:30, with keys jangling like wind chimes, and me whispering good morning to the beans. The burnout crept in on soft paws, the same songs on the cafe playlist, oat milk cartons multiplying like rabbits, apologies on autopilot for drinks that took 3 minutes instead of 2. Then one morning I pulled on a fresh pair of sheer pantyhose, a pair I kept for Moxie, and stepped into my black cafe trousers. The fabric skimmed my legs and made a clean whisper when I walked, a private charm bracelet nobody could see. At first, it was just about friction and ease and the small sin of something beautiful hiding under the uniform. But the second my shift started, I knew I had done a good thing. The nylon made me stand taller. The glide kept my steps smooth. When I bent to grab cups, I didn't feel the usual raw scrape of cotton on skin. It felt like I'd greased a hinge on the door of my mood. I worked that whole day with a secret shine, and when a regular named Theo said, "You seem lighter today," I thought, if only you knew. June arrived with a heat wave that sat on the city like a sleepy dog and refused to move. The cafe's AC complained but did not commit, and our oven breathed out cookies like hot gossip. We had a dress code pinned to the corkboard. Black tops, black pants, closed-toe shoes, shirts long enough to cover the midriff if anyone reached up for cups. But management was loose about everything except shoes, after a busboy broke a toe 2 summers ago. The real rule was, wear what lets you smile. It turned out that a way to smile was to stop pretending my legs belonged to December. By day 3 of the heat spell, my coworkers had adapted. Lena tied her t-shirt into a knot at the back like a breeze. Simon switched from thick jeans to something that might once have been called slacks, but had given up. I stood in front of my closet looking at a row of pants, and next to them, a few skirted aprons I'd bought for a Moxie number that never happened. The aprons were black and practical, with a wraparound knee-length panel that looked like it might belong to a modern chef or a medieval apothecary. I tried one on over my sheer pantyhose. It draped in a clean line, covered as much as my shorts did, and felt like standing in the shade. I texted the group thread, "Skirted apron day? It's 98 degrees and I want my kneecaps to forgive me." A heart from Lena, a laughing skull from Simon. I walked to work early, feeling a little like a superhero whose cape had been tailored into something sensible. Most regulars didn't bat an eye. They were there for caffeine and the way we spelled their names right without asking. Mrs. Dalloway, not her real name, but she always ordered flowers for her table and never corrected us, looked up from her scone and said, "Darling, your legs are positively cinematic," which made me blush like a summer tomato. Theo, who typed code and drank cortados, grinned. "Is this a Moxie leak?" he asked, a question that felt like someone gently pulling back a curtain. "This is an Ezra heatwave solution," I said. "Moxie will not be doing inventory." We laughed, the kind of laugh that lets air into a place. A teenager in an all-black outfit that did not appear to breathe took a photo of the menu board and then asked if we had student discounts because the bus was trying to become a sauna. When I handed her an iced tea she didn't order and said, "Cool off on us," she looked at my skirted apron and said, with a mixture of wonder and relief, "I didn't know we could just wear stuff." Meanwhile, a man in a polo who always paid with exact change frowned at my knees as if they had opinions. He asked for the manager. The manager, Cassia, rolled out from the back like a circus ringmaster, whose main trick was keeping the espresso machine from flooding the earth. She looked at my apron, then at the man. "We encourage practical attire during extreme weather," she said. "He looks great." The man peered over his receipt like a periscope and said, "I'm just saying, there are children," as if my kneecaps were sending postcards from Paris. Kasia smiled without showing teeth. "And what a wonderful civics lesson," she replied, then pivoted to refill napkins, a move I privately scored as a perfect 10. 2 days later, someone dropped a comment on the cafe's Yelp. "Good drinks, but I don't think men should wear skirts unless it's a kilt," which is different because history. 3 5-star reviews cannonballed on top of it, and we went back to counting the seconds between the AC's wheeze and its half-hearted gust. Then the owner, rarely seen and mostly heard through emails signed with gratitude, called a meeting. We sat on milk crates in the back, which smells like a field trip to a dairy. He used words like brand consistency and guest perception and our vibe, and every time he said vibe, Kasia's right eye twitched like a small signal. He didn't mention my legs directly, which was almost worse. Instead, our bodies swam around us like we were fish who had misread the temperature. "We've always prided ourselves on being family-friendly," he concluded, "and this heat wave has produced some attire that may alienate certain guests." The milk crates creaked as if to register objection. Lena raised a hand and said, "You mean Ezra's skirted apron?" The owner paused like a dial tone. "I mean, we must be mindful." "We are," Kasia said, and her voice was velvet but had the outline of a blade. "He's covered, safe, and faster in prep by 10% because he's not sticking to himself." "There are, potentially, optics," the owner insisted, looking at a spot on the wall where the paint had peeled into the shape of Florida. "We will revisit after the heat breaks. For the time being, let's return to pants." Later, when we stood shoulder to shoulder at the bar, Lena murmured, "I hate it when someone uses optics to mean my eyes feel challenged. I wore pants the next day because I needed my job, and the espresso machine doesn't care about my principles." By noon, my skin felt like it had been saran wrapped, and I gave away 2 free iced lattes just to justify stepping into the walk-in fridge for a long inhale. That evening, Moxie Midnight got on stage at Velvet Never Dies in a teal sheath dress and sang with my whole rib cage to a crowd of people whose faces I could not see, but whose applause felt like a blanket warm from the dryer. The DJ played us off with a remix of "I'm Every Woman," and when I stepped into the dressing room that smelled like hairspray and whispers, I checked my phone. A message from Kasia. "Wear what you need tomorrow. I've got you." I stared at the screen until my eyeliner decided to sting. Moxie took off her wig like a sunset taking off its crown and went home to hang pantyhose on the shower rod like flags. The next day, I wore the skirted apron again, with sheer pantyhose so light they looked like a rumor, and I arrived before dawn with a small bag of ice for the AC. Kasia had sent an email to the team titled "Extreme Weather Policy," which said, "In the interest of worker safety and sanity, practical modifications to the uniform are permitted, including but not limited to shorts, skirted aprons, and breathable fabrics. Closed-toe shoes remain mandatory because gravity." The owner did not reply. The morning rush came in waves. Strollers, suits, freelancers with headphones like earmuff tiaras. And with the oven off, we were less of an inferno. Even so, around 10, a woman with a neat ponytail and a voice like glass said, "I have to ask, is this appropriate?" She looked at my knees the way you might look at a typo in a wedding invitation. "Appropriate for staying conscious," I said, then realized humor had left the building. "Also, the apron wraps fully. No wardrobe malfunctions here unless the espresso machine decides to explode." "I'm not trying to be rude," she said, but I brought a children's playgroup. Behind her, small humans in mismatched socks were reimagining the laws of chairs. "You're not being rude," I said softly. "You're being honest." I thought of Moxie's patter, the way I teased a room into gentleness. We want this to be a place where everyone can breathe. Sometimes that means we wear something we can breathe in. She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "I like your nails." They were short, painted a color a paint store might call library green. "Thank you." She left $1 extra. At noon, a woman with a short gray bob and a canvas bag that read "Eat, Pray" review came in and ordered an Americano and a half baguette. She sat under the hanging philodendron and watched the room the way a cat watches a window. I knew her from the bylines. Mara Bloom, food columnist for the local paper, kind when she could be, and surgical when she needed to be. She wrote about service like it was a conversation. When she asked for a second Americano, I brought it out and she looked at me with eyes that had read a lot of menus and a lot of people. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "Lately," I said, gesturing to the oscillating fan that was valiantly fanning a patch of empty air. "People come in hot, leave cooler, literal and otherwise." She asked if she could take a photo of the tip jar sign. Tips help us pay rent and buy bagels. Both are crucial to survival. Then her eyes dropped to my apron and back up to my face with a kind of gentle accounting. "That looks comfortable," she said, and something in me relaxed like a fist opening. "It's a skirted apron," I said. "More coverage than shorts, less sweat than pants." "Smart," she replied. "Has it been well received?" "Mostly," I said, "except when it isn't." She nodded like someone filling in blanks with empathy instead of ink. The review ran 2 days later under a headline my mother texted me with 15 exclamation points. "A haven with houseplants. Juniper and rye keeps its cool." The first paragraph praised the citrus-zested cold brew and the cheddar chive scones, which she called the pastry equivalent of a pep talk. But then she swerved in that deft way of hers into what the room felt like. "In a week when sidewalks shimmer like mirages and tempers curdle in their containers," she wrote, "this cafe offers something radical. Permission. You feel it immediately in the small kindnesses. Free ice waters refilled without asking, baristas who see your wilt and offer a seat by the fan, and an approach to uniform that understands that dignity and comfort are not opposites. On a recent afternoon, an employee wore a practical skirted apron over sheer hose and moved like a breeze. A few customers arched eyebrows. Most exhaled. The message was subtle but robust. This is a place where your humanity is not an inconvenience." She didn't romanticize us. She mentioned the AC that needed replacing, the day-old cookies that should be discounted without having to ask. But she concluded with a sentence that felt like cool water poured into the idea of us. In a city where people sweat their way into meanness, Juniper and Rye remembers that hospitality is a choreography of care. And sometimes care looks like letting your staff choose a uniform that doesn't make them faint. The photo she ran showed the philodendron, the tip jar, the light on a pitcher that made it look like a small moon. The owner forwarded the review to the whole team with the subject line, "Wow," and no body, which is a corporate way of saying I have been gently proven wrong. Something shifted after that. Not dramatic, like a rainstorm, but definite, like a dial turned up a notch. People seemed to look at each other a beat longer. The polo man still counted out exact change, but he also started bringing in pressed pennies from museums to add to our tip jar, because he'd read somewhere we collected coins. The playgroup woman began ordering the usual and smiled with her eyes before her mouth got the message. A trans teen began coming in regularly, shoulders gradually unhunching, and one day they wore a skirt like a flag of truce. In the late afternoon, when light filtered through the leaves and turned the café the color of tea, I'd feel the steady, pleasant ache in my calves and the gloss of nylon shifting against the apron when I walked, and my body felt like good equipment well maintained. Moxie felt closer too, not as a secret, but as a layer. After close, I'd sometimes sing under my breath while I wiped the espresso machine's chrome. The steam wand caught my reflection, and for a second I looked like both of us. A man whose mouth loved lipstick, a barista whose hands knew milk. There is no conflict in that sentence now. There used to be. The owner bought a new AC unit after a plumber showed him a repair bill that used the phrase "beyond salvage," and the installation was an event lacking only popcorn. We cheered when it coughed into life and spilled cold air like an apology. An older gentleman who always wore a linen suit brought in a portable hand fan and ceremoniously handed it to me. "For your personal climate," he said, which made me smile so hard I felt my molars. On my next day off, I took the morning train to a shop run by an auntie who understood fabrics like a pianist hears chords. And I bought 2 more pairs of sheer pantyhose, one with a satin finish, one with a whisper of graphite gray, and 3 new skirted aprons with deeper pockets. At home, I hung everything over a chair and looked at the little row like a promise kept. Later, at the club, Moxie performed a quietly triumphant number in a black silk wrap dress, and afterward a woman in the audience said, "You look like you're in on the best secret." And I said, "I am," without needing to tell her that the secret was as boring and as holy as comfort. We never got a follow-up email about optics. Instead, Cassia added a line to the employee handbook that read, "Dress code exists to keep you safe and our latte art undisturbed. Within that, wear what helps you do your job and remain human in all weather." Every time I see that sentence, I feel a warmth that isn't temperature. The cafe has become a haven, yes, but not because of a review or a dress. It's because we said, over and over with our hands and our habits, you can be a person here. Bring your sweat, your nap schedule, your pronouns, your exact change, your complicated day. Sit, have water. Let the plants watch over you. Let the fan call your name. And if someone behind the bar is wearing a skirted apron over sheer pantyhose, no, it's not a performance. Or maybe it is, but in the way that most hospitality is, a practiced set of gestures that says again and again, "I am glad you are here. I am glad I am here too."